So let's call the meeting to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Sure. Councilmember Diep.
Present.
Councilmember Davis. Davis is not here yet. Councilmember Hamis.
Here.
Mayor Licata. The mayor is not here yet. Okay. Chair Chapel Jones.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So now we want to review the work plan. There are several items that are being dropped. We can get all those items in one motion. That'd be appreciated.
Motion to, I guess, drop the items. Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Nothing on the consent calendar. And now we go to reports to committee. Item number D1, the Smart City Roadmap.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, members of the general public. My name is Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. It's my pleasure to have an opportunity to walk through the latest iteration of our Smart Cities Roadmap. If you notice, I'm here with ample backup today. And the reason for that is that one of the things that you've asked of us is that we go a little bit deeper into some of these projects and actually demonstrate the technologies that we're working on and working to execute. And we realized as we got deeper into a couple of examples that rather than us talking about it, we'd bring it to people doing the actual work, our technology leaders. So I want to introduce that team here briefly, and then I will turn it over to my counterpart to take you through the Smart City Roadmap update. So we'll be giving you a little bit of a teaser trailer of the Central Emergency Vehicle Preemption Project, led by Ho Nguyen with our Department of Transportation, Rudy Young from Police, and Joss Joseph with Fire Department. We'll also be diving into urban logic with Wilson Tam from our Department of Transportation and Augustine Coelho Leon from our Department of Transportation as well. And again, we'll talk more about this as we go, but I'm really glad to have the actual people who know what they're talking about here so we can go pretty deep on these and get into some of the interesting complexities of these two important innovation projects. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Rajani Nair, who will take you through our latest iteration.
Thank you, Kip. Thank you and good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members, and members of the public. My name is Rajani Nair, and I'm the Smart City Manager for the Innovation Team. So last month, we shared with the committee how we intend to broaden and deepen our work around innovation through 7 identified themes, as shown on the slide, around innovation to help us implement the Smart City vision. After discussing this approach with some of the departments, we recognized that smart sustainability should be included with Clean City so that 1, the Smart City Roadmap will recognize and identify the city's efforts towards sustainability as established in the Climate Smart San Jose, and 2, it truly embodies all the city departments and the services we provide to our community. As we mentioned last month, underneath each of these themes, we've identified strategies that was either developed, in process, or planned for the future. Each of these strategies are color-coded based on its status, as you can see in the keys shown in the bottom left-hand corner. We did add emerging mobility strategy under Smart Mobility theme, which will allow some flexibility for the city staff to embrace any future modes of transportation beyond scooters, for example. Ultimately, as a Smart City Roadmap matures, more strategies will be identified so that it will continue to help departments develop a portfolio of projects that will ultimately help us achieve our goal to be a smart city. Currently, staff is developing the strategies identified in green and will be providing the committee updates in the next few months. We shared with you our first prototype of the roadmap, which identified all the active projects, our big rocks, under each theme and strategy. As we noted, citywide, we are managing nearly 6 times the number of projects since the development of the Innovation Roadmap 1.0 back in January 2017, which initially identified 22 projects. Our biggest challenge as we scale these projects will require additional budget and training for staff to deliver these projects. As we just kicked off the prioritization process for our Small Wonders pipeline, so we will provide the committee update once we have an opportunity to learn and reflect on the process. Here is a more organized format and overview of our Smart City Roadmap 2.0 to demonstrate the magnitude and complexity to truly make City of San Jose a smart city. Showing the Smart City Roadmap in this perspective will help the community, the committee, and the city departments understand what improvements the city intends to do, shown in the progress column in that right next to the theme in the second column there. However, we wanted to highlight that there will be a wave of projects coming that have already been identified in the initiating column in that light blue-green, so that we will need to be prepared to address additional funding and potential staffing needs to help execute these projects. Please note these projects you see in the columns identified in progress and in initiating have not been prioritized. We will collaborate with the departments to rank these projects so that our community, committee, and council and city departments understand the priorities and to discuss to plan how to deliver these projects and if reprioritization is necessary. You may have noticed that we have modified the colors used for status reporting under the in progress column so that it is more sensitive to those who are colorblind. Shown in the key of the bottom left side of the slide is the bluish green indicating that the project is in progress or on schedule and on budget. The yellow will remain for minor schedule or budget delays, and the magenta will be used for major schedule or budget delays. Right now, the color coding you see here is reflective of the current status of all the projects. Many of the projects identified in yellow and magenta have been scheduled, and the teams will be providing the committee status updates in the next few months. Once we have an opportunity to prioritize the list of our big rocks, we will share that to the committee along with the progress made with the prioritization process of the Small Wonders pipeline projects that are currently underway. In this slide, here's an example of a close-up view of the identified projects under the Smart Infrastructure theme. For future meetings, we will use this format to provide status updates for all our projects and strategies. However, nevertheless, it is important for us to recognize and highlight the great success and progress our city has achieved in less than 2 years. In the future, we will use this slide to identify the outcomes achieved for these projects. How we plan to develop our outcomes for each project will start with the development of a strategy as shown on this slide. We recognize the importance in identifying goals, outcomes, and results that will help our community, council, and departments further understand how we can collectively improve the level of service we provide to our community. This slide is an example using the broadband strategy and how we were able to identify high-level goals, define project outcomes to achieve these goals, and what we intended to be the desired end results. As you all recall, we were able to understand that if we wanted to address the digital divide, we needed to define a broadband strategy in order to help us understand our goals and outcomes. Once that was evaluated, we were able to define project outcomes that allowed us to negotiate large telecommunication deals and establish the development of digital inclusion program that will help fund design, research, and recommendations. Ultimately, we will achieve end results in deploying 4,000 small cells and 1,000 miles of fiber. To help validate how we will be achieving these goals and outcomes will require us to establish operational metrics at a project level. What is shown in the call-out is a sample of the metrics that was committed by the small cell team to provide a dashboard to gather data, measure our performance, and drive improvements. Establishing these types of metrics will allow us to enable city staff to identify opportunities to help improve the process. Lastly, we will come back to in February 2019 and provide an update on the Smart City Roadmap 2.0 on the following next steps as shown in this slide, And also, we will provide the committee a prioritized list of our Big Rocks and Small Wonders project. So this will conclude my part of the presentation. However, I wanted to take the opportunity to showcase some of the innovative work that our city departments are doing and be more proactive in telling our story. Also, we wanted to commend our city staff who are future innovators in thinking of ways to help them be more efficient and effective in what they do. The first project is the Central Emergency Vehicle Preemption Project, will be presented by Ho Nguyen, who is our Senior Transportation Specialist from DOT. This project was led by DOT and collaborated with both by fire and police departments in an effort to help improve response times. So I'll pass this to Ho.
Thank you, Rajani. My name is Ho Nguyen. I'm with the Department of Transportation. Before I start there, I want to thank especially my other teammates, Joe's from the fire department and Rudy from the police department. It was a big help. Without their support, we couldn't have this project done. So I'm really excited to share with you the completion of the Central Emergency Vehicle Preemption System. It's perhaps one of the most innovative projects that I've been involved with in my 20 years here with the city. We're the only second agency in the nation that I'm aware of to deploy such a solution on this scale after Palm Beach County in Florida. But before I talk about the project itself, let's talk about what we were trying to solve with the project. When you call 911, you expect the emergency vehicle to arrive at the incident as soon as possible. However, with increased traffic in San Jose, it has become increasingly difficult for the fire department, in particular, to meet the county's mandated 4-minute travel time, at least 90% of the time. This has left the department in jeopardy of losing up to $150,000 in county EMS funds per month. The biggest contributor to this problem is the wait time at intersections. When an emergency vehicle arrives at a green light, it's not so much of a problem, obviously, but when it arrives at a red light, the emergency vehicle has two options. First, if there's a clear path to the stop bar, the vehicle will slowly approach the intersection. When the driver sees no oncoming traffic and is safe to enter the intersection, it's only then that he will proceed across the intersection. However, if there's a queue in front of the emergency vehicle and there's no clear path to the stop bar, the driver will have to turn off his siren and wait for the signal to turn green. Only then will he then reactivate the siren and then slowly encourage other vehicles to pull over as he drives across the intersection. So what is EVP? It's a functionality in the traffic signal controller that allows it to safely override the normal operation of the traffic signal and provide a green light for the oncoming emergency vehicle. Prior to this project, EVP was only made available to fire engines, and the system is made up of many individual hardware components. The system uses the infrared technology, which was really invented back in the 1970s. And it's comprised of an emitter that's mounted on the fire truck and a receiver that's mounted on the signal pole. And there are some components inside the signal cabinet. So the system has many limitations. Number one, it requires a near line of sight. If there's trees in between, it's going to block that signal. It requires a great deal of maintenance. If there's dust on the lens, you have to clean them. And thirdly, it's very expensive. To retrofit a typical intersection with this infrared system, it costs in the range of $10,000 to $15,000. To retrofit the entire city, it would cost upwards of $9 million. So as you can see, it's very expensive to go with the traditional route. So what we're trying to solve with this project is to eliminate the additional hardware, its maintenance, and ensure safety and improve travel time for emergency vehicles across the intersection. So the map that I have you here shows a lot of red, but those red is basically activation zones. These zones are what captures the emergency vehicle as they approach the intersection. When the vehicle enters these zones, the system sends a request to the signal controller to preempt the signal. To take a closer look at each of these intersections, here you have an intersection at Snell and Branham. The red zones represent zones for fire vehicles. The blue zones represent zones for PD vehicles. As you can see, the PD vehicles are a little bit, zones are a little bit longer because PD vehicles travel faster. So therefore, we want to trigger the preemption sooner for the PD vehicles. But the idea is that as the vehicles enter these zones, the system will trigger the preempt call. This diagram just briefly shows how the system works. As the fire engine enters the zone, as I previously shown, it sends its information, which includes the GPS coordinates, the speed, and the heading, to the CAD system, or the computer-aided dispatch system. The computer-aided dispatch system packages that information along with a bunch of other information like the vehicle ID, the agency ID, and it forwards that information to our traffic control system. A traffic control system then does the heavy lifting. That's the one that tracks the vehicle's location and sees whether they are in those zones or not. If they are, it will then send the preempt call via our city-owned network to the controller. And that's a key thing here, is that throughout this entire process, we wanted to utilize as much of the city's existing infrastructure as possible. We use the cellular network to communicate between the fire engines and the CAD system, and we use the city's own transportation network to communicate between the traffic signal controller and the TCS system. So there wasn't any additional hardware that we had to procure for this system. It was pretty much a software solution. So how does this all work? I just want to show you a quick video, real quick clip here. So this was a video that we captured during one of the pilot runs that we conducted back in July. This is a video showing us going down Snell Road through 3 intersections. So you will know that the signal is preempted when the left signal and the through signal are green. So you saw that was both signals were turning green. This upcoming one at Rosenbaum, you will see the left and the through signal will also turn green. And then lastly, Skyway and Snell, that will also turn green. So this is just a quick clip that we, like I said, conducted during a test run. I'm happy to say that we started full-scale deployment back in July. It was completely deployed to all 955 signals last week. The biggest drawback about this system is that it does not work on county expressways because we do not own the county's signals. We're currently working with the county, with my counterparts in the county, to implement this technology. And I believe that there is a follow-up by the fire department to evaluate the improved response times as well, and they will present that in a follow-up meeting, I believe.
Oh, so you mentioned that there was a $9 million cost of the old Opticon system, which was less reliable and had less functionality. You and your team, how much did it cost take for you to deliver this?
Thank you for reminding me that. I should have said that. So actually, the entire system, the software solution cost us $700,000. So that's less than 1/10 of the cost. Yes.
Thank you, Ho. I really appreciate that. Our second project is just as exciting. It's about urban logic, which will be presented by Wilson Tam, who is an associate engineer at DOT. This project is essentially a platform that will be a centralized location for traffic data and uses machine learning to analyze traffic counts through a visual display showing traffic flow patterns in congestion areas.
Thank you, Najari. I would have to say that City in the Box is exciting, but I'm going to introduce something even more exciting than this. Good afternoon, good afternoon, council members, members of the committee, and also the general public. My name is Wilson Tam. I am the interim transportation planning manager at the Department of Transportation. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you how DOT is trying to use innovations to address a critical problem that I would say probably almost all DOTs and all public agencies in the nation have been facing for decades. And this critical need is how to streamline the flow of collecting transportation data for a purpose, such as performing a transportation planning study, archiving the data after use, and retrieving the data in the future for different purposes. Streamlining this process is very challenging because of 3 reasons. First, processing the data is very labor intensive. Second, archiving data often results in significant information loss. Third, we do not have a good data that serve multiple purposes. So we are working with Urban Logic on a pilot study to streamline this data flow process. But before we start, I would like to introduce my team who contributed a lot in this project, and this project would not be possible without their bright minds. So if you can stand up after I announce your name. So first I would have Ramses Madhu, who is our division manager for the planning and project delivery. We have Joe North, our innovations manager. And right behind me is Augustin Coelho Leon, who is our engineer in our team. And we also have Rina Alok, who is not here today, but she also contributed a lot in our effort. So before I talk about this pilot study, let me first use a transportation project as an example to explain how transportation data are used and why addressing this data flow problem is critical. Think about the Better Bikeway project, as you all know about it. This project is being implemented in central San Jose area. This project is about redesigning several streets to make it safer, more convenient, and more comfortable to bike and walk. The project started with planning and design, when we identified better bikeway corridors, recommended locations to install protected bike lanes and traffic calming treatments, and allocated space among street users in ways that serve the goal of the project. We picked 2 weekdays and asked our vendors to collect vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle volume data at 20 signalized intersections during peak hours, which is shown in the picture in the top, and 24-hour vehicle volume and speed data at 80 mid-block locations, shown in the pictures in the bottom, and some parking utilization data. Most vendors provided raw data files in 2 formats, Excel spreadsheets and PDFs. We had only 1 engineer who had to manually make sure every data point was valid by comparing it with data collected in previous years at the same location, if we had many. Okay. If the new data did not align with historical trends, the engineer needed to find reasons to justify for the change, such as they would have to go to Google Earth or our previous project files to figure if the change was a result of the street network being under a different configuration in the past. Sometimes the change was a result of an updated sweeping schedule or a special event nearby it that we were not aware of. If the new data could not be justified, they needed to be recounted, which means more delay and more cost, until they were acceptable for the transportation study. Now, after the study was complete, what do we do with the raw data files, which are hundreds of Excel spreadsheets and PDFs? Archiving these data points into either an Excel database or Geographic Information System, GIS, was a challenge because the Excel and PDF files were developed by different vendors and therefore were in all sorts of formats. Rather than developing a macro in Excel to parse the different formats of raw data into the databases, we decided it is even more efficient to manually enter the data one by one. And due to limited staff support, we were able to archive only roughly 20% of the data we collected. The other 80% of the data are currently sitting idly somewhere in our server. Our data needs extend much beyond project planning. As the Better Bikeway project is in the construction phase right now, We have a project delivery team that evaluates construction impacts and provides rerouting options. We also have signal operations team that updates our signals and ensures efficient real-time intersection operations for all roadway users, including emergency vehicles. We also have a neighborhood management team that addresses constituents' concerns as they get accustomed to the new design, and the infrastructure maintenance team that ensures the pavement quality is brought to standard. And of course, our team, long-term planning team, that monitors the performance over time and ensures that the street network is consistent with the city's long-term urban design and transportation vision. These efforts require lots of data and happen in different points in time, possibly years apart. Without a centralized data system to which these efforts can access and share data, what happens is each team would go through its own data process in silos. 80% of the data would get lost, and we would not achieve the compounding value of data, and we would continue to allocate resources on purchasing the same conventional data repeatedly at the expense of other unconventional data sources that we could have otherwise collected and incorporated into our insight building. The city would also be prone to making less informed decisions and bearing the risk of making unintended mistakes with bad data on projects that would be extremely costly to overcome and unwind. So, Urban Logic is a data analytics firm that aggregate, automate, add, and analyze diverse data sets to help governments like San Jose better understand the needs of our communities. We are working with Urban Logic on a grant-funded pilot study to streamline DOT's data flow process for 2 conventional data sources: intersection volumes during peak hours and 24-hour vehicle volume data at mid-block locations. We provided Urban Logic thousands and thousands of raw Excel and PDF data files that DOT collected in the past 5 years. Although these files come in various format types, the study team is developing for the city a centralized data platform that applies statistical techniques to decode these files and inject all data into one single platform. By about early next year, we will have a platform that would allow data vendors to upload new data directly to it, validate the new data based on historical trends automatically, and automate the aggregation of data to serve a study's need. More importantly, the system would apply machine learning algorithms to generate estimates at locations where data are scarce and analyze different data layers together to predict the travel behavior into the future. I would say that I've been with the city for 3 years. For those three years that I have been with the city, I think DOT spent more than $300,000 per year on collecting conventional data sources. Like many other governments and public agencies in this country, we have not been able to fully capture the compounding value of data and beyond the purpose the data originally served. From this pilot study, we will understand more and more about the power of a centralized data system and what the important criteria are for the long-term data platform for DOT and the city as a whole. The long-term data platform, which we will release an RFP to obtain after this pilot study is complete, would streamline the data flow process and provide not only DOT staff, but also all departments in the city a systemic view of our city functions and unlock new insights surrounding the strategies for smart city implementation. Thank you.
Okay, it takes out.
Thank you, Wilson. And this concludes our presentation, so I'm going to turn this to Kip.
I think the only thing that I want to add out of that, there's a lot that we could dig into, but I'll leave that to those questions to the committee and to the council. I think the one thing from the city manager's office perspective and from my perspective that this is important reinforcement of is that technology, especially good technology and service of our city, is ultimately powered by people. And having the kind of technology leaders that we have in this building, and particularly at this dais right now, is absolutely critical to being able to do things like emergency vehicle preemption that allows firefighters and police officers to arrive faster, and do things like plan the city of the future in a way that is data informed. And so I'm particularly proud to be sitting here amongst my colleagues and geeking out a bit on this, because this is the type of brain power and talent that we are able to attract, and we need to retain and continue to provide opportunities to learn, grow, and lead in our organization. So with that, we're happy to take any questions on the overall roadmap or any of the two particular projects. I will, of course, as always, pass the hard questions on to others.
Thank you, Kip. And I really want to recognize the Civic Innovation and Digital Strategy team, and Kip and Reggie, and as well as the team that worked on the Central Emergency Vehicle Preemption Project, Ho Win, Jose, Joseph, and Rudy Young. That's an amazing project and a real win that should be celebrated, and we should acknowledge that. Also for the Urban Logic project team, Wilson Tam, Augustin CL Leon, and Rena Alog. I want to acknowledge their hard work and what they have accomplished too. It's really what this committee and this project and these teams are all about in terms of advancing the city forward, finding out innovative ways to utilize technology and process to make the city more efficient in the city of the future. So congratulations on that. I also want to welcome our YouTube audience. So now my colleagues, we have another opportunity to be YouTube sensations. So if you want to try to capitalize on that, you have another bite of the apple. And I want to, again, extend congratulations to the team. So I'm sure my colleagues have several questions. So we'll start with Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. And I also want to thank Kip and the teams. I really appreciate the deeper dives today. It's great to kind of get specifics on the great work that you guys are doing and really kind of to know what's really going on in the city. So I have a couple of the Urban Logic project is very interesting to me. Before I started here, I did a little data project with the Lincoln Avenue Road Diet. There was before and after data, and that all came in PDFs, and we had to manually move it into Excel before we could move it into Stata. And so my question is, in the Urban Logic, it looks like it will give you predictions, but will you be able to get raw data out? Will that be available for students or other researchers who might want to use this data and add it to existing data that they have? Will that be possible?
It's entirely possible. So one good thing I really like about Urban Logic is that the archiving part is really dive deep into the real raw data. When we talk about archiving that we do in the past, it's not really raw data in my opinion, because there are so many data points that because of the limited staff support, we are not able to archive every single data point. So we have to find a way to kind of aggregate the ultimate real data into a level that we feel comfortable archiving. Mm-hmm. But with Urban Logic, everything is automatic, so we don't have to be concerned about human intervention. So vendors would upload their data points maybe every 5 seconds or every 5-minute increment into this platform, and it could be downloadable.
So you're talking raw data at the car X went by at 7:04 a.m. and 55 seconds at 26 miles per hour.
Right.
Instead of getting the averages in the increments.
Exactly,
Five
because
or 15
because the
minutes.
PDFs that we obtained from the vendors, they have to go through that middle
Right.
process of trying to understand what the raw data is about. So they will give us, for example, every 15-minute increment
Yeah.
volume or speed on a speed bins. So there are multiple speed bins, but if we really need the real data at the ground truth level, and then build our insights up from the ground truth level, that will be a lot more accurate. And I think Urban Logic will be able to support that. And
And that raw data will be exportable.
will be exportable.
Okay.
And I think I mentioned a little bit in my presentation, but I may not have stressed enough, is that the power of Urban Logic or other similar data platform is the ability of machine learning, which means we don't have resources to count every single location, right? But how does the system understand the existing data points and generate predictions in areas that we may not have the resources to collect data, and provide us estimated data in a form that is still acceptable for a transportation study, for example. And that is really powerful. We as engineers have applied this method manually in the past, but it may take days to come up with something to estimate data at a certain position. But now everything is automatic, it's streamlining. If I want to understand a particular local residential streets that we don't have historical data, Urban Logic would be, or other data platforms will be able to grab existing data in its surrounding and see if they can generate some machine learning and deep learning out of it and provide insights.
So will there be additional, in addition to the kind of the traffic count data that we were talking about, will there be other additional data identified with each street, like lane configuration or the width of the street?
Right.
Will you have those so that, because otherwise just nearby traffic patterns will give you part of it, but people will choose a wider street or a street with a more direct access to a major artery than they will one that is narrow and that winds around and is just for the neighborhood. So will you have sort of characteristics of each street in the data set as well?
So what we highlighted today is one part of several types of testing we're doing with the Urban Logic platform. So the planning data and ground truthing it is one. Really the power is being able to unlock additional data sets to marry it with those types of data sets. Yeah. So to your question about additional data sets being layered on to make better decisions, the possibilities range from economic development data being layered on, so that economic development can make better decisions. Safety in terms of collision can be taken into consideration, design, all of those types of things. But until we get the ground truth, which was what Wilson was kind of talking about today, it's really difficult to really unlock all of the other implications we can do with this platform or a similar platform. Does that answer your question?
So partially, I guess just want to make sure I understand. Do you mean that block by block, we don't know what our street specifications are enough to put them into a data set right now?
We do have data, but the data is inconsistent and is by an intersection level. So it's not married together holistically. So you can't look at a corridor as a whole without a lot of manual inputs, which takes a lot of staff time to be able to do that type of analytic. Right. But this platform will solve that problem. And it's not just a problem that we have in San Jose. This is a problem that every city is trying to grapple with right now.
Yeah, and it's not just the Department of Transportation, right? We're doing lots of capital projects out at the treatment plant, and we don't even know where all our pipes are. So I understand that it's an issue for pretty much every department, and it's just a function of kind of where we are on the computing timeline, I guess, the data collection timeline. So I get that. I was just trying to figure out where we are.
Yep, it's like a fast forward button by having them help us out with this.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you. Very cool. So kind of moving back to the big picture, and I wasn't here last month, so I may have missed the new themes and strategies for the Smart City Roadmap implementation. I think I heard you say, Kip, I think it's like the second slide, you added Clean City and Smart Sustainability. Was it not on there before?
Clean City was on there before, but we didn't really have the sustainability called out as a completely separate theme. Obviously, sustainable was on the overall smart city vision, but when we had done the initial breakout into themes, we hadn't done a complete translation across. So we just iterated and added it back in. So the one if you were here last time, it would have said something like Clean City, but not the sustainability piece. So we realized that needs to be called out not only in the overall vision, but in the specific themes and strategies.
Okay. And then, so some of these are not, like the Climate Smart Plan, that's not owned by your team, right? So some of these are not all on your team's shoulders.
Correct, and that's
Okay.
actually part of the strategery is that we really want to put the smart back in the city, and so by engaging more deeply with the crews that are doing the work, by making sure that the roadmap reflects the core service work we're doing, ultimately what we'd like to have is that this is reflective of the city as a whole, and that we may have a shepherding role or a bit of a role in terms of reporting out or highlighting stories, but almost all of the work should be done by other people.
You just get to take all the credit for it, is that it?
Right. We don't actually do any work. We're city manager types, so.
All right, thank you.
I knew data analytics would get you all excited, Councilmember Davis. And Kip, I already knew strategery, so you have to come up with a new word that we can learn today. Councilmember Camus?
Yes. And for my YouTube audience of 129 subscribers, to my Johnny Camus on the record, I wanted to ask you, now that we have and I'm ecstatic about the signal light priority for our police and fire departments to get to where they need to go faster. I would love to get a report in a year's time to see how this new signal priority system has affected efficiencies in getting to the where they need to go. You know, because I'd love to see us take advantage of the. I'd love to credit you guys with the millions of dollars that'll be potentially coming in from Santa Clara County, assuming that they don't put more hurdles. But that's what I'd like to see.
Yes, I think the fire department has been tasked with that. I think, as a matter of fact, they're going to be doing some travel studies to see if the system has immediate impacts. Definitely a year time. I'm pretty sure Jose will come back and present something, right, Jose?
And in addition, we have some of our smart city partners have reached out to provide data analytics and help us think about how we do those analyses and some of the things that we might be missing, and also looking at additional variables like the amount of congestion, which we currently aren't able to measure, and how that impacts travel time. So in addition to just a direct measurement of changes in travel times, we expect to do some more sophisticated analysis work. But I may have just stole fire department's thunder, so go ahead. Is there anything you want to add?
This is going to definitely help our travel segment of the response time, and we will be conducting some studies on it, and we'll report it back.
Yeah, to this committee, or are you going to go straight to PISFIS, or could we get
were
both?
thinking of doing it on the PISFIS.
Yeah. Maybe you could send a memo to the full council, because I don't sit on PISFIS necessarily, but I would love to see how this process actually helped. Quantifiably. And thank you very much, and I appreciate all your work. I was really moved to actually clap. We don't clap too often up here, so but trust me, this was a big thank you to all of you. Thank you.
So I just have a couple of questions. Going back to the roadmap, it would be helpful to me, and I'm assuming to my colleagues, if we drill down a little bit more in terms of some of the items, particularly items that go to red, but even the items that aren't in red. It would be really helpful to get some more detail. But if an item does go to red, I think that we should get a readout at the next committee meeting, because the next item on the agenda is really a good example of information and updates that we probably should have been getting more information on. So my recommendation is that we definitely have more detail and we drill down on these projects.
Oh, just want to validate. Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'm recognizing is we need to tell our story more and more with regards to innovation, not only just for our own community, but even for the country, you know, that people can really learn from some of our experience, because we've been really trailblazers, as you can see what our teams are doing. So I do recognize that importance. And also, we do have these projects scheduled, the ones that have been identified in the yellow and the magenta. So they are scheduled in the next 2 to 3 months to give status updates. So we will not only talk about what's not working, but also talk about what's fantastic as well. So.
Right. And I have to get used to the new color coding. You know, red screams, you know, emergency. Magenta is kind of pretty chill. I don't have that same sense of. Do you have that same sense of urgency with magenta? All right. Also, there's a couple of other suggestions. So, for instance, key victories. It'd be great to even add an additional column to highlight what, you know, the benefit of that key victory was, or the outcome, or the, you know, why was that a key victory? And then in terms of metrics and quantification, like on slide 7, as we move forward with these projects, and I brought this up before, so you're fully aware of it, that the better we define the metrics and the outcomes, and we're able to quantify it and measure it, I think the better it will be for this committee and for the community. I also wanted to provide input on, I know that we dropped several items, and it would probably be helpful for this committee if we, you know, got an understanding from you when we're dropping these items, you know, how is that going to impact our work plan, the reasons why we're dropping these items, and the outcomes of dropping those items as well.
First of all, we'll do on all the suggested changes, and then in terms of the dropped items, I feel like I owe the committee an apology. We had they came in onesies, twosies, and then when you look at them all together in the accumulative, we've moved quite a number of things off. Most of that was to accommodate the reality of the schedule shifts or availability of key staff, but you have my commitment that I will do 2 things on our next 6-month roadmap. 1, be a little tougher on deferrals, and 2, in the case of the actual need for a deferral, be very clear on the actual reasons for that with you in both the memo and communication. So my apologies for those shifts. In almost every case, I feel confident, with one exception, that we've got good work underway. So message understood and received.
Great. Thank you. We have a speaker, Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you. Very informative, as usual. Thank you. I'm really interested in your this item here, and just what would it be called? The you know, where things are standing at this time. And you know, I'm really into, you know, to try to better describe, you know, what I'm trying to learn how to do at this time is, you know, better accountability with technology can be based on ideas of civil rights and civil protections and social justice issues, actually. And I think those are really, they're ways to really help intelligent thinking happen. And it just brings out the better parts of ourselves and the better parts of our community and the people within our society. It just brings better thinking. And you have a couple items, thank you, up here, safe city and equity, that, you know, are very prime candidates for the questions of what are civil rights and civil protections and social justice issues. I don't say those words enough up here, but those are the kind of words that I think should be inspiring and exciting to help yourselves learn how to include, transparency and openness with technology more. And and those words and those kind of ideas have to be a part of all this. I mean, it just makes it more fun, to be honest. And thank you for offering homeless issues and to talk about them, like the procurement strategies you'll be working on. How do you include accountability when talking to companies about procurement? And then at the same time, how do you convince those companies that the school systems under equity can also, get help from the civil rights and civil protection process, and it all melds together and works together to create the true innovation that you're really looking for. So that's my big lecture for today, and really learn to include what good is about civil rights and civil protections. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. Can I get a motion to accept the committee's report?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. So on to item number D2, Integrated Permitting System Update.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and members of the public. For this, Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. For this next item on the integrated permitting system, would like to invite up to the box with me our Director of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement, Rosalind Huey, our Assistant Director of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement, Chu Chang, and our 3-week-old new product manager, Ajay Singh, as well as Will and Chris from our partners on the vendor side. And so with this, I will turn it over to our director, Rosalind, to walk us through our integrated permitting system update.
Great. Thank you, Kip. Again, Rosalind Huey, Director of the Department of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement. And our team is really pleased to be with you this afternoon to share an update on our integrated permitting system program. So just by way of overview, just wanted to share with the committee that this program is just not merely an upgrade in our permitting system, but it's really a big transformation in the way that we do work. And obviously, it's going to include people, process, and technology. That's something that I have borrowed from Deputy City Manager Kip Harkness here. And with that, this is a very complex program with 5 key areas that I'll just go over with you very briefly. So first is the next generation of this platform. So it is an upgrade from our existing platform from Amanda 6 to Amanda 7. Secondly, we're involved in business process improvements around electronic plan review, which we know is so important to our development services customers. We currently do electronic plan review, but now we have the opportunity to actually integrate it into the Amanda system, and we're doing quite a bit of folder reconfiguration in this program. Thirdly, which is a big component of the program, is a new public portal that will make a big difference for our staff internally, and most importantly, I think also for our customers in terms of accessing the information, tracking their applications that they have submitted to the city. Next, data quality improvements, including GeoCortex. And then lastly, which is also very important, is this mobile service capability. So the opportunity to actually do mobile inspection services. So we've been on this journey for about 2 years now. And in that time period, we have actually completed significant work. So we are pleased that actually we've been able to complete requirements for about 75% of the program, and that's significant work. And then additionally, we've had the opportunity to actually implement something new where we're seeing a change for our staff and customers. And actually, we've implemented a new inspection dispatch system that's now reducing the time that it takes to assign our inspectors, and it's reduced by about 30%. So we're very pleased about that. So 2 years into this work, we have, though, learned quite a bit. So we've learned actually that we have underestimated the complexity of the parallel work and really the magnitude of the staffing and resource and time demands for the program. And so as a result, we've actually been unable to really focus on completing any one specific project because we've been working on all fronts simultaneously. So in June of this year, we actually decided to pause. We actually decided that it was important to actually assess the overall program. And we decided to work with Gartner, a consultant, to actually conduct a health check for our program. And we understand that these health checks are actually quite common in these types of complex technology projects. So Gartner actually provided us with a series of key recommendations and obviously findings as they reviewed the program. And I'll just go over those real quickly. So first, just inconsistency in the scope management practices. They found that incomplete project cost and status reporting, and this is where we knew that items were being reported to the steering committee as a green light, for example, but in actuality, when we asked specific questions and really delved into it, many items were yellow or actually red. Thirdly, the timing of the project phases hasn't really aligned well with the availability of project features. And then fourthly, as we transitioned into the Agile methodology, that key areas were overlooked. So that pretty much sums up what we found and discovered doing the assessment, but we are pleased to report that we are now on course correction. So with that, we decided in August to actually hold a scope and schedule summit with the vendor, their team, and with staff across all of the development services partners. So during this time, we reset the vendor and the city expectations based on the product availability. And then secondly, we started the very important conversation about a realistic and mutually agreed upon scope and schedule. Secondly, we established a new governance structure for the program, and this model really is to improve timely decision-making and to actually buffer against future schedule slippage and scope issues. And then thirdly, as Kit mentioned earlier, we have brought on a new project manager. We actually determined that we needed to make a significant change in how the program was being managed. And so we are very delighted to have Ajay Singh on board. He's been with us about 3 weeks now, and he brings a wealth of experience to us. He has an extensive career background, namely 10 years with American Express, heading product development and management. So I feel that we are very fortunate to have Ajay on our team. And with that, we're going to have him now walk you through our new approach to the IPS program.
Thanks, Rosalind, and good afternoon, council members. So on the next slide, I think the big question is, okay, how do we move forward now, given where we are with this program? So as Rosalind mentioned, the program itself is highly complex, has a number of different capability transformations, process transformation, as well as involves a number of different teams and vendor partners. So as we look at it, what we are trying to do with this program is really start stacking and restacking different components of the program. So when I say that, if you think about it, the first phase is how do we build the infrastructure, that's the next generation, which is Amanda 7, as well as how do we fix the data quality issues, as well as how do we improve our business processes. The vision stays the same. We need to get to digital 100% digital servicing, improve our productivity and efficiency in the processes, as well as transparency with the whole process as we look at our stakeholders. The second piece, which is very important, is given the complexity, how do we chunk it into smaller projects with very focused team, very focused effort from the partner? How do we get them implemented? How do we measure the success and impact? That's very important because that's the only way for us to know whether stuff that we are thinking and doing, is it adding value to the overall program and overall services that we provide. So very much a metric and a results-driven approach with a very short time periods and focused approach, as well as pilot and learn methodology. Given its software, its technology, we cannot wait for 100% of requirements or 100% of the product there. I think we need to move forward in an agile method. We need to pilot, we need to test, learn, and that's, I think, a way of approach and methodology that we take forward with our internal teams as well as development teams. The other piece is as we build the infrastructure, the next phase then comes is how do we now take this infrastructure, process improvements to the public and to multiple stakeholders. And then last thing is part of this whole piece is how do we make sure the customer journeys are being improved. So it's definitely a long time frame effort, but the key for us is we have to be fast, we have to be agile, we have to see results in the short term, then wait for 24, 36 months to see the final outcome.
So with that, I wanted to just kind of frame this up, and before we open up to questions, I've mentioned to some people that I've talked to this about. I'm a big fan of Jim Collins. Had a chance to learn from him when I worked with John Donahoe, who was the CEO of eBay. And one of the things that Jim Collins is really strong about in terms of leadership is facing the brutal facts. And so what we have here is we're facing the brutal facts of this project. We are not where we want it to be. We are significantly behind schedule, though we have done a lot of good hard work involved. And so we are now in a reset and a transformation. The good news is that our vendor partners are actually in a parallel reset and transformation and our agreement with the way that we're approaching the reset. When I asked Gartner to do the work of the health check, I was very clear with them that there was nothing off the table, that we could walk away from this, we could make whatever was the right decision. Their recommendation was that even though there had been significant delays, that we had the opportunity to be successful with this project if we made significant changes in the way that we both had the team formed and in the way that we governed and managed it. And so we've initiated those changes. You see some of them right here. We brought Ajay on board, somebody that I knew in my larger PayPal network but had not worked with directly. He has an undergraduate degree from the Indian Institute of Technology and Computer Science. He has a master's from UT Austin, also in computer programming science, and a master's in business administration from Harvard, which I've heard is a pretty good school. As well as coming to us from a number of exciting companies, including having worked at Amex as vice president of their digital product there. So he knows this work, and he, like Dolan, who's been up here on this table before, has chosen to trade the billable hour for the fulfillable hour and is coming and working with us in helping us think differently about this. Some of the immediate changes we've already made is we've changed our governance structure, and I think one of the hardest things that Rosalind had to do before we made that change was try to convince 9 other people that any particular decision was the right thing to do. Those of you up on the dais can certainly understand the complexity of that. In our operations, that was slowing things down and effectively gave every single person at the table a veto over every single decision. And the result was we were either too cautious or we were trying to optimize the product for 9 different products at once. And so we've created a governance structure which effectively gives Rosalind 51% of the vote. Not that she won't listen to fire and public works and transportation and all the other important aspects, but that in the end, if a decision has to be made and the executive committee cannot come to consensus, she's empowered to make that decision. That's different than what she had before. The other key difference is, again, this product and agile approach that we're taking, where we're not just thinking about this as requirements that we're going to write on a piece of paper and then we're going to go in a dark room and then 2 years later you're going to pop something out. We're going to iterate and test and learn from this as we go. We're also going to be respectful of what is on the vendor's roadmap and not expect every single thing to be customized. We're going to have to accept some of the product as being the product out of the gate, and if that gives us 85% of the functionality, that may be enough, rather than trying to customize every single aspect. So all told, facing the brutal facts, building the team, changing the governance structure, and taking the product approach, we think puts us on the path to reset. But it's not the end of the journey. We believe we'll know in about 5 or 6 months whether this approach is bearing fruit and we have both the right team approach and are able to deliver the working software that's going to meet the demands of our external customers. as well, and be functional for our internal customers as well. So with that, we'd like to close. We're here for any questions that you might have, and we also have representatives of the vendor along with us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kip and team. Normally, I allow my colleagues to ask questions first, but this one, I gotta kick this off. In your presentation, I didn't see where it was quantified in terms of the investment that we've already made into this project. Can you quantify it both in terms of vendor costs as well as internal staff time and cost?
Thank you, Council Member. So I can share with you in terms of what the vendor has invoiced and what's been paid to the vendor at this point, and I'm going to look at Chu Chang to confirm, but it's right around the figure of $500,000 that has been invoiced. Is that correct? He's saying yes. In terms of staff time, and that's a big part of this overall budget. One big portion, obviously, is the contract that we do have with the vendor, but we have city staff across all of our development services partners who are participating as subject matter experts. And their participation is crucial for the successful execution of this program. And so we have actually now are tracking that staff time. And we're also preparing, given the fact that we are extending the overall schedule, so we're probably looking about another 2 years for the overall program. We've already sketched out what additional staffing resources that it's going to take to the end of the program and to implementation. So I don't have those exact figures. It looks like I may be getting those figures right now. Thank you.
Including those not charged to the project.
Staff to date. Okay, so I do have a figure for staff time to date on the project. So for the 2 years that we've been in, it's about $2.7 million in staff time.
In addition to the $500,000.
That's correct.
And those that's what they invoice, but are there any outstanding obligations that the city has from the vendor?
Yes, great question. So we are actually working with the vendor now to come up with an acceptable payment schedule. And we were actually just having a conversation with them earlier today about what that looks like. Obviously, as we reset this button and begin to restack the work moving forward, we do anticipate there are going to be some changes. So we're in those conversations now with the vendor about what the agreeable payment schedule is going to look like.
So where we are right now is probably north of $3.5 million of investment in this project. Would that be a fair statement?
That would be a fair statement, yes.
Okay. So 2 years, $3.5 million. We don't really have any software or anything to really to show for that investment. And I know that there were some incremental improvements, but overall, it's pretty much a sunk cost. So my question to you, actually, I'd like to ask the vendor this question. Why wouldn't we just scrap this, to consider it a sunk cost, and just totally go in a different direction? Why should we continue to go down this path? So I guess that would be directed to Chris or Will.
I'll take that one. Yes, that is certainly an option that the city has, obviously. We feel, though, through the process of participating in the Scope and Schedule Summit and participating in the activities of evaluating where the project has not been successful, that we have a very good handle on those on both sides, both the vendor side and the city side. So I think there's a lot of confidence in the plan and the discussion as it's been described as a result of the Scope and Schedule Summit. So from a vendor perspective, a lot of the questions, a lot of the open issues inside of the project, we feel have very, very well been resolved. And so we feel very confident in terms of the path forward.
So, Rosalind, I wanted to get it from your opinion or perspective from the city, why we should move forward with this vendor and not just scrap the whole thing and start all over again.
Thank you, Councilmember. That's an excellent question, and that's something that I've been working with the development services partners in terms of getting to a point to. I think that, number one, our approach on the staff side has much improved. I think at the end of the day, we have to establish a very good relationship with our vendor, and we have to understand that this is a team effort in order for this to be successful. So like Will said, we have begun to reestablish the trust and understanding that for both of us to be successful, we have to work well together. We are a very important client of this vendor, and we know how important this new program is for the city. Clearly, we want to have the right folks on the bus, as Kip would say, to get us to successful implementation. I would add that although we've held the Scope and Schedule Summit back in August, we've been very frank and clear with the vendor that if things aren't moving forward, as we have both agreed upon that it would, we have this 5 to 6 month period where at the end of which, we will evaluate and see if this current approach is the best approach for the city. And at such time, then we would be making a decision to take a different approach.
What are the consequences, or were there any consequences for the vendor not delivering over this 2.5-year period? Or are there consequences?
I would say there are, actually. The part of the good news, bad news on this is the way that the contract was structured was actually in many ways very, very favorable to the city. But that meant that that we've paid out $500,000. I am quite confident that the amount of actual staff time and work time by the vendor is far in excess of that. So, and we have not paid out for anything that hasn't essentially been in that contract. So we've had a conservatively written contract, and we haven't paid above sort of what we've been given. So everything that we've paid is based on the deliverables to date, even though it has yet to generate working software, which is why there hasn't been more payment. And so we've kept the consequences have been that essentially they've had to invest significantly more in this project than they thought. And as we've talked about with the vendor, that's not part of the going forward negotiation. So we're not making up for any of those in the past. And so that essentially serves as if you will, a penalty to them for that approach. So I think those are pretty severe consequences. And again, going back to the earlier question, we've been really clear that not going forward is very much an option. And so the Scope and Schedule Summit was qualitatively very, very powerful in terms of us feeling like we could work together as partners and get this across the board. But it's been, I'll stop there, but I think the consequences are that the $500,000 in no way fully compensates them for what I imagine their expenses totally are.
So, and you explained some of the new process and procedures that you're implementing to make sure that we stay on track in the future. Written into the agreement, are there going to be, milestones where if they don't meet those milestones, that there's some, ramifications of that versus continuing to move forward like we did in the past?
Well, as Rosalind mentioned, we're in the process of figuring out what we need to renegotiate and what that contract will look like. We want to make sure that it's pointed towards success and that we have the incentives to success. Exactly sort of what penalties or clawbacks, to me, are secondary to making sure that we've got it set up in a way that we have agreement and success on. Though I think we can look and make sure that there are penalties and methods that we have at our disposal to make sure if the commitments aren't adhered to, that we have options.
Okay, because I'll be honest with you, looking at the amount that we've invested in this project and seeing what we have delivered to us, it's obviously very concerning. I'm sure it's concerning for all of my colleagues. And, I think about $3.5 million, I think about, hiring more police officers or the staff time that was used for this project that could have been used for other projects, and understanding the needs of our our clients and customers and residents that that aren't being met is really concerning. And I would need to have a lot more information in detail, and I'm sure the whole council would, in terms of being or feeling comfortable moving forward with this vendor in this process. So on that note, I'll defer to my colleagues.
Thank you. Since I got most of this report in the ad hoc committee, I'm not going to pile on, but you already know my thoughts about this. I do want to thank you for this final slide. I don't remember why we chose the public portal and electronic plan review over mobile inspection. I think the last I heard, there was still, that decision was not yet made. So if you could elaborate on how you made the decision on this, the flow of the approach, I would appreciate that. And then I had another thought, but it's gone.
So as we are making these decisions, there are three critical components that we are looking for. One is there's a lot of, as everyone said, a lot of work has been done based on the requirements and where we stand in the delivery side. The second piece is what's important from infrastructure perspective and where the dependencies are. So we don't want to stack something which requires totally rebuild because we changed the infrastructure 6 months down the road. We're also looking at resources where they are. The whole intent at this point is how do we make a fast execution, because if you think about it, it's a huge spaceship or board you want to call, with number of different moving parts. So as we are stacking and restacking, key is what does the stacking gives us? How do we move fast? How do we minimize the impact towards time to market, as well as cost to the overall project? So, but definitely it also depends which phases are well in advance, what dependencies are there, what's the business impact, because you're right. I think public portal, electronic plan review, integration may have a lot more impact, or mobile inspection may have it. But if we are not confident we have a solution that can be really executed against, we may start moving with certain processes where we have more control. For example, business process improvement on folder, internal stuff, but impact on efficiency and productivity. Same as data quality. There's no reason why we should not fix that if we can get it done in 2 months, and that really impacts the overall efficiency of all the internal teams that are working on those data pieces.
So so if there are business plan improvements or business process improvements that need to happen on the inspection side, for example, that will be happening as the public portal is being worked on.
Absolutely, or some may even be
independent of the platform.
Or some may be happening even in the Amanda 7/business process. So we are looking at what can be done without major impact. So we are working on that, and we keep stacking, restacking the whole way as we move forward. How do we drive results? Only thing that matters is how do we implement certain capabilities that are bringing business benefit, and how do we move fast?
Okay, great. And the other thought did reoccur to me. Do we have any kind of documentation? I know institutional memory is, I don't want to necessarily have to rely on that, but do we have any kind of documentation on lessons learned for this $3.5 million lesson that we've learned? It sounds like some things were good, right? The contract was good, but what the mistakes we've made and what we've learned from them, and how we will put these forward, Kip, in all of our projects that you had on the roadmap earlier?
Yeah, there's just two answers to that. One is, for this project in particular, Gartner did a very good job of documentation, not only in what to go forward, but some of the key lessons learned, both the positives and the negatives. And so we have that. The other piece of intentionality is, as I've talked with both Rosalind and Ajay and Rob as well, is that we see this as a way of how we think about enterprise deployments and enterprise products across the organization. One of the things that's essentially not fair for somebody who's managing a very large, complex, downward-facing business like Rosalind and Chu are, is to expect them to be product experts and experts at an enterprise platform transformation like this. That'll happen once every 5 to 7 years. And so part of what we feel like we need to do to better support our leaders is to provide more of that capability centralized. So you might imagine, for example, in the future, that someone like Ajay, when he successfully delivers this project, could take on a greater leadership role across department lines, earlier on in the process so that it's structured in the right way, and then also loaning out those resources to departments as they go so they don't have to invent all of this from scratch for themselves. So we hope that are we able to deliver this in the way that we intend, it will serve as a model for other enterprise deployments.
So project management and implementation, both, but not necessarily in the same person. Is that what you're saying? Because project management skills are one set, but implementation is a completely different set of skills.
Right, and so that you need deep expertise in what you're actually talking about in order to drive that implementation, but you need that overall project and also product approach, which is what we've been lacking. So we think that providing more centralized capability, particularly around that product and project management, could be very supportive of the downward-facing subject matter experts who are handling the implementation of the service delivery on a day-to-day basis.
And we would want that to be in-house because the knowledge of our city structures is required, because why wouldn't we on a product by product basis have a consultant come in?
We might, but we will also want the incentives to be aligned. And in a large, complex, multi-system organization like ours, two things. One, there's probably enough work to keep the in-house component going at a reasonable level. And two, we want to make sure that one of the things that we're making sure we're coaching Ajay on, for example, is the shift into our culture, not just city culture, but our specific culture, is pretty darn complex. And so if we can have somebody who combines both the outside product management perspective and an understanding of how to get things done within the city, we believe that that's effective to have in-house. I still think there are a lot of times where you could do this out-house, you could get a consultant to do it. There are lots of different projects where that will be our approach. But for some of these larger ones, that require deep integration with the existing work processes, I think we're well served to have some internal capacity on this and capability.
Okay, and then how do you balance that with having the insider perspective of our processes and not being willing to use best practices in changing those processes?
It's a good question, and I think part of that is to do intentionally what we've done here with Ajay, which is rotate people through over time. I don't necessarily think that we'll keep somebody in that position for the next 15 years, but providing an opportunity for them to do this and either rotate back out into private industry or rotate them to another position within the city, but always be attracting a mix of people who've been doing it for a while and a little bit of new, so you have that kind of Q factor is what they call it, that balance between the fresh and the old. I think it's very important. I don't think I have a perfect answer, but you're right. Once you're entrenched, no matter how much of an outsider perspective you have, you tend to go native after a little while. Right. And you want to make sure we keep it fresh. I think the bigger challenge, though, is how we do, as we saw in the last presentation, how do we keep our internal staff thinking fresh as well?
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts on that.
Councilmember Campbell?
Yes, I actually do learn every time a new phrase from you. Billables into fulfillables. That's a good one. I am actually disappointed. We actually even did a workflow study, before we embarked on this effort, and they brought like many things that we need to change in our workflow. Did that advise us in this in any way? In this, for at least what we needed to do for procurement purposes? Rosalind, that study that we embarked on for like a year, and then.
Yes, thank you, council member. So yes, back in, I think it was December of 2016, we completed the study with management partners on process improvements and our overall fee schedule. And with that study, there was 91, I think, different recommendations that the development services partners are collectively working on moving forward. Currently, we're focused on service alignment across departments, and the Office of Civic Innovation has been helping us. We have 2 pilots. We've been reporting on that work at the ad hoc committee. But in the fee study report, management partners definitely recommended this transformation in our permitting system. And many of the recommendations that they brought forward were based on making sure that the city did move forward in developing this new system and upgrading the system and providing the transformation in our process improvements.
Are we going to get an update on all those 95 recommendations anytime in the future?
Absolutely. So we, on a regular basis, have been providing updates at the ad hoc committee at our bi-monthly meetings. What we haven't done probably lately is provide you with that full list of 91 items and kind of check them off, provide you with a full update on what actually has been implemented, the things that we're currently working on, and then the things that we're going to be looking forward to implementing in the future. So we can certainly do that at a future ad hoc meeting. The next meeting is in January.
Thank you. So from what I'm hearing is that you're going to tell us whether we're going to go forward with this vendor in the next 5 to 6 months.
We are going forward with this vendor at this point, and we will know within 5 to 6 months whether that was the right decision that we've made. So we've made the decision to move forward, but talk is cheap and the proof is in the pudding. And so we want to give ourselves the ability to demonstrate that with working software and a team that's working in the manner that we think is appropriate. So that's sort of the standard that we're holding ourselves to, and would expect others to hold us to as well.
Yeah. So my only concern is, we actually had an extensive RFP process and that took a little while. Would we have made this decision to go with this vendor had we, thought that this was going to take, 5 years to implement? Not because that's what we're talking about now, right?
I actually try not to do that kind of retrospective hypothetical thinking because there's so many different things that I would like to change about my personal life. It just makes me it makes me stay up at night. And the way that I bring that in is, okay, what am I doing now in the moment that I would regret? And I think we have all deeply debated this at the executive level, and this is not an easy decision. But again, largely out of the experience of the Scope and Schedule Summit, we feel like we have a partner in this who can deliver this, and that if we make the changes that we need to make and they are able to do what they say they're going to do, then we've got something that makes sense. But it's a tough call, and I'm very hopeful that it's one of those ones that as I've discussed with the vendor, it'll go one of two ways, right? This will be either the thing we'll be presenting in conferences in 3 years about how you restart and you deliver value to customers, or this is going to be one of those things that you're not really proud about that you tell at conferences and learn from. I wouldn't be embarking on this if I didn't think this was the right thing to do, but it's a very tough call, sir.
Thank you, Kip. Really appreciate your efforts.
Councilmember Depp?
Yes. So I don't follow the ad hoc committee, and so I'm unaware of the 90 recommendations in some report. But I guess I just had a more basic question. So, anybody who runs for office says that government could be more efficient, and we're going to get in there and we're going to change the system. So I guess our current method of permitting, whatever, getting licenses out and getting permits out, I suspect that there can be efficiencies gained by, doing certain things differently. And I guess my question is, when we're digitizing the current process, are we basically accepting those inefficiencies and then just kind of digitizing them, as opposed to sitting down and figuring out our workflow and figuring out the most optimized process and then digitizing or modernizing that?
I think that's exactly the question. For any given complex process, there are always hundreds of things that could be improved. I think the challenge that we have, and Ajay has actually put this to us, and we're working on this, is to clarify what's the short list of 2 or 3 key customer pain points that are the most important ones to solve, and then doing exactly what you suggest. Don't just overlay a new digital process on top of an old bad one. Is create the optimal process that uses technology for those pain points. What we can't do is make these improvements across everything, things that happen only once every 3 years or something that affects 4 people. But what we can do is, as we do this replatforming effort, say, what are the 2 or 3 things that are really different about this new process, and make sure that the technology, the process, and the people are all aligned to deliver that. For example, one of the hints that Ajay dropped is around this notion of sort of self-service, or on digital, the availability of the services that are not necessarily in person. If that turns out to be one of the key pain points that we need to solve on, then we should figure out what are the services that are most amenable to being self-serve, what are are the ones used by the most people, and what are the ones that we should then therefore prioritize as the ones that we do the most process improvement and technology investment around. And so that's the kind of work when Najee talks about stacking and restacking that we'll be doing, and be doing, folding in the process improvement work alongside if we do it the right way. So one of the things I think you'll see in the future is a clearer articulation of what are those customer pain points that we are solving for, and that frankly means also what's the long list of customer pain points that we may not be solving for in this particular upgrade.
Sure. Okay, I'll take that. Thanks, Kip.
Okay, we have a speaker, Blair Beekman. Did you want to speak on this one? No? Okay. Well, thank you for that report. I'd like to get a motion, and in that motion, if you can include referring this to the full council, as well as having this as a standing item for the bi-monthly ad hoc development services committee. You can include that in your motion.
So moved.
Are you asking that it be agendized as a separate item for discussion at the council, or just that the report be sent to the council for information?
That it'd be agendized.
Okay.
So moved.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, and I'll let Councilman Camus participate in the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, thank you very much. And now we're on to open forum. Blair, did you want to speak on open forum?
Hi, I wanted to bring up a few more items from from my first talking about your future plans, how plans are working out. I like the cybersecurity idea a lot. I think that's a good idea. Cybersecurity chief or something. I think that can be a good between person to deal with my accountability issues that are so important to me in talking about. I thank you very much. I've heard the idea that you're possibly trying to develop a public community committee to work on accountability and overall technology issues. If you can develop that, that is really the way to go, and you guys really have it together in that, and thank you immensely. To talk about the broadband that was mentioned, broadband and like the LED light project, those two projects are costing San Jose a lot of money right now, and that's a part of the Measure T bond issue. That's my feeling, and that's the importance of it at the early stages. And I think it's important. You got to have a good accountability with those things. It isn't enough just to have equal access. The whole point of equal access is to invite the community to then be a part of the equal access that we're partaking in and that we're building. We're building the future of low-income communities. Why not build accountability with that technology that you're bringing in at the same time? I mean, I keep saying it's all part of the same mix. You can't, separate everything so much. And, we're learning that, and thank you. And I guess, and I also want to mention life in the school systems. It really, I think, can help introduce and just simply teach with good civil rights and good civil protection ideas. Can teach young people. And that's good for the whole corporate thing you're trying to build.
Thank you, Blair. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Meeting adjourned.